Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Taylor's of Harrogate's Rose Lemonade. I've just thought, when the weather gets slightly warmer, I get in the mood for slightly summery drinks, and this is warm, so I don't need it iced yet. I don't need anything iced until it gets really warm, but I still enjoy it. Anyway, I was just in the mood for it. But yeah, how you doing? I've been around, but I've been a little tired lately, and some days weren't quite warm, and haven't really been feeling the energy to make too many videos lately. But I really wanted to make this April 2024 wrap up, so here I am. I have been busy reading. I've been enjoying most of my reading. I think there's two things that these the books that I read in April have in common. One, I think, and I could be wrong. I have to make sure to check back again to make sure this is factual. I think I did 4 stars out of 5 for every single one of these books. So now I believe that a month full of 4-star reads is a good reading month. Um, would it be nice if I had one that I really deemed to be 5 stars? Yeah, sure, but it's not necessary because they were good books. The other thing that all these books had in common is that they all seem to be in some way or another about women. And I didn't intend that. It just happened. Some are biographies, memoirs, etc., and some are novels, but they're all mostly, I think, about women. Yes. Now Freddie's on top of me now, and yes, he's like he didn't want to talk about women anymore. He just wanted to show that he's a man. Anyway, but so let me get into it, and I'm going to start with the first novel that I read in April, and that is the aptly named The Enchanted, The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. Just wanted to make sure I said that right. It was kind of a buddy read with my sister, but I don't think we had a chance to discuss it yet, which is a shame because it's one of the very first times that we did a buddy read that we both ended up finishing it in the same month. It's a miracle. But anyway, and well, I'll discuss it now then. I thought it was a really good book. It was about some women, 4 women, who decide to get a place in Italy. They're all from London, and the weather's been very bleak, and I can imagine that because when I started reading this book, I actually started, excuse me, in April, but a bit damp, a bit miserable, and sometimes you just feel, oh, if only I could get away to somewhere nice and warm and you know, just cheerful. So one of them comes across an advertisement for a place in Italy to rent for a month, and so it ends up being four women, 3 of a rather youngish nature, I think 20s and 30s, and then one an elderly nature, I guess in her 60s or something, maybe 50s and 60s, I think. Um, and none of them really know each other um, well. The first 2 people who do the major part of the planning, they just met each other and then they got together a few times before they left. Um, but they're they're all in circumstances that aren't necessarily terrible, but just the feeling of getting away, not just because of weather or scenery, but maybe just some change in life. Some of them feel a little bit too stuck in their situation. One really just feels that there's no real, their husband just doesn't really care about them so much anymore. Both of the married wives kind of feel like that. But one is of a what do you call that? A rich person who has a title and just isn't happy right now. And then the elderly woman who, I don't know, she just felt like getting away. And she's very kind of stuck in her Victorian past, which I in a way enjoyed as someone who enjoyed a lot of the references to different Victorian writers and artists. So that was kind of cool. And so I really liked the book. It was, where did I put? Oh, Freddie's on top of it now, so I can't hold it up anymore. This is what Freddie does. He needs to be part of the action. But I thought it was a very beautifully descriptive book and rather funny. Obviously, well, not obviously, but the circumstances aren't very realistic. My sister, I believe, said something in her little review about it being a bit like a fairy tale, and it kind of is. And I liked that aspect of it. But I think the reason why I didn't give it a full 5 stars. There's a couple of reasons that aren't. I'm sorry if I'm being nitpicky, because it really was a good book. It really was an enjoyable read, and I do recommend it. But part of it is that feeling that I always get when I read of people going away to another place and they don't really, they don't, I mean, look, I have been to the Caribbean, for instance, and enjoy the scenery and enjoy the, the hotels, whatever, and barely got to know the people there. So going to Italy and barely interacting, besides, talking to servants, whatever, with the people of Italy. I mean, it makes sense, but it's sort of, I don't know. I don't know why it irks me. I don't know. There's always this little sensitive part of me for some reason. Whenever I read about the English from like 100 years ago interacting with Italians, because there's always this sort of condescension. And I don't think they were outwardly being condescending, but there was just this feeling that I got in the writing. And I'm not always walking around sensitive about that. I've never been to Italy, so it's really hard to say that. But I guess because I have one side of my family has the Italian background, I just, whenever I read that literature, as someone who is also, who also has, I guess, a British background, not really, because I grew up in America, but and if you just went to Ancestry, and I love reading English literature and English history, as you probably can tell. But I don't know, for some reason, it's like when I read When Angels Fear to Tread, and it's a long time ago that I read that book, a very long time ago. But there's always that feeling, and it didn't outwardly say anything like that in this book, but just just even the almost ignoring the characters that live in Italy. I don't know why. It shouldn't bother me, but it just just in a minuscule way it did. So maybe I'm just looking to be sensitive about something. It didn't bother me throughout the book the entire time, but just I think it just slight feeling that I had. But that was just a tiny thing, and I really say, do not let that hold you back if that's something that you ever get feelings about for some reason. Like, this is why I should have talked to my sister about it, because I'm sure she did not get that same feeling. Um, and and she's been to Italy and I haven't, so I don't know. I'm maybe just sometimes in the month of April I can be really sensitive about things. I don't know why, because it tends to be not a bad month, but be that as it may. Um, the other thing I didn't like is that there were some things that I felt weren't quite resolved. Um, uh, I don't know how to put this without giving away ending, but there's some things that certain people did that I said, oh, I don't think they should have gotten away with that, um, or is this, are things really going to be better for everybody now, or is it just going to be back to normal? I don't know. So, and I know you can't like wrap up everything all the time. I think as someone who claims as Jane Austen's her favorite writer, I always say, she always wrapped things up so well. And yet, even with Jane Austen, you don't really know what's going to happen to everybody once everybody gets married off at the end of the story. So, again, not a hateful book whatsoever. I don't remember there being any particularly bad language or anything like that, because some books can say, I say language, but not in the terms of. Anyway, it was a good book. It was a good book. I don't know why I'm being even a little bit negative. So if I sounded like I was just ranting about nothing, old man yells at cloud kind of situation, sorry about that. I will try to be less sensitive when I read books. And I don't think I was. Well, maybe once I start talking about the other novel. So let's talk about the other novel. I'll get that out of the way. This is just more of, actually, I really loved, I mean, they're both written by Elizabeth. Okay, that's another thing a lot of these books have in common, not all of them. A lot of Elizabeth going on here, but Elizabeth Gaskell, I finally read. I was reading this with a group of people, so I got to discuss this already. Ruth. This is one of her earlier novels, and this was controversial during its time. This is before Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I really have issues with Tess of the D'Urbervilles, so I was really hoping it wouldn't upset me the way Tess did, and it didn't. Not quite like that, but there were things that upset me, and it's more of the hypocrisy of the Victorian era. Every era has hypocrisy, but it was so much so of the whole oh, we're so virtuous but we can't be forgiving type of thing. So Ruth is a very young person, not little kid, but still quite young, and she is orphaned, and she is working, doing her best to be sort of an apprentice situation that she could make a living. And she meets a youngish but older than her man who is seems to be very kind to her and very interested in her. And one little thing happens, and suddenly she finds herself in a situation that I don't think she ever planned to be in. And eventually she is left behind and pregnant. And if it wasn't for the fact that someone happens to be very kind to her and takes her in, and this family, there is a brother and sister and their housekeeper who are very they're like the real good guys in the story, because they know that what she did was wrong, um but they actually feel for her and want her to just be able to have some form of life. And so that's the story. So it's what's going to happen to Ruth. Herself wasn't that interesting to me, her as a character, but her situation was interesting, and the way people took it in those days, the way people would blame the woman for getting pregnant, and the man sometimes would get away with things. And nowadays this is something that in some places the man would get arrested for, because she was definitely underage. But yeah. So but the way some people treat what happened as this you know, sin that cannot be wiped away. And it bothers me because these people are all quite Christian, and that really does, well, conflict with what is the basic teachings of Christianity about love and forgiveness. And obviously, there are things that the Bible says not to do, but also there is such a thing as, well, if someone is truly repentant and living a life to try to make things better, then don't make them live the rest of their life in grief and in shame. So Elizabeth Gaskell, I mean, the fact that she got me worked up over this is what I really was impressed by, because I think she was apparently, I read a little bit of the introduction, she was influenced by a situation that she had come across, a person that she had found out, and someone who found themselves in one of these positions where people who should have been kind to someone who did something that maybe perhaps they shouldn't have done, treated like they murdered someone, and it was a well written, beautiful, beautiful descriptions. The one thing that I have to say, now I can hold it up now that Freddie's gone, these two books have in common are very beautiful, lush descriptions of flowers and nature. And I do appreciate that. Going back to an Enchanted April, once I get past my rant, that was another one, beautifully describing the growth of different blooms at certain times. As someone who wishes I could have been a gardener and really gotten to know flowers in such a way, I only bring a few varieties of flowers into my house because a lot of them are known to be toxic to cats. So I'm extremely careful with my cats, because my current generation of cats will get right into the pollen and probably endanger themselves. So I feel sometimes a little bit bereft of not being able to be around flowers that much, especially because I live in a city. And so hearing these beautiful descriptions of nature and beauty, it is quite nice. Anyway, the only reason I didn't give Ruth 4 stars is just because, well, I'm not gonna say what happened in the ending, but it annoyed me, not as much as some Victorian novels do, but just because I think I didn't quite love it as much as I did Cranford, Wives and Daughters, North and South. I don't remember what I gave Mary Barton. I think I may have also given that 4 stars as well. But I have to say, Elizabeth Gaskell is still pretty much a heavy hitter for me. She is one of my favorite Victorian, or out of any time, writers. So far she has almost never gone wrong for me, like fully wrong for me, even when a book isn't as preferred as another book. And I will say the same thing about Elizabeth von Arnhem. This is my first book of hers, and it was beautifully written. I am looking forward to reading. Is it called Elizabeth and Her German Garden? That sounds actually something that I should be reading. And I think she wrote another one I think it was called Father or something. That my sister read it. I know she was very, very, very into it. So we're gonna have to have Bonnie back on these on this video because she's got a lot of things to talk about, um, and that might happen soon. I hope. All right. So I'm going to back to another woman who I quite like, and this is actually a little bit of a sad reading for me. Not that the book was sad, but it's a reread. Was this my only reread this month? Yes, I'm getting into a lot of rereads the next couple of months, I think. So stay tuned if you like rereads. But this is a reread that I believe I read it in 2018, so previous to me being on BookTube. So, and I've mentioned this person a couple of times, I think, in videos. I could be wrong. If I haven't, well, I'm about to. And I'm going to talk about Iris Apfel. So, Iris Apfel died in early, I believe, the first day of March or the last day of February of this year. And she was 102 years old. That was quite a long life. But I was still sad about it because I really learned about her beyond her seeming familiar in 2016, because that's when I saw her documentary, and it was fantastic. And I said, oh, this is an interesting woman, and a lot of her perspectives are things that I can get on board with. I'm not saying everything about what she said I was in complete agreement, no way, but no person on this planet am I in complete agreement with. But I enjoyed her, and I just loved not just the way she dressed, but even the way she referred to things and talked. She was a very intelligent woman. She was an interior decorator and worked along with her husband Carl for a very long time, traveling around sourcing things for her clients, and eventually starting a textile business to old world weavers that made old world style textiles. And so once she was basically retired, she later on, due to the Metropolitan Museum of Art exhibiting her accessories and other things, but especially accessories, and she was the first person, I think, from this museum to have a one-woman show as a living person. But she was like in her 80s, I believe, when this happened. So suddenly she got a new type of fame, and she started calling herself things like geriatric starlet. And it's pretty cool that she got that later in life, and she kept going. She was active, making lines of fashion and decorating items, rugs or whatever, up until right shortly before her death. I was seeing her and being involved in things, being on like I think Home Shopping Network or one of these places. I haven't had that channel in ages, but I remember seeing it before. Anyway, and it made me. What I liked about Iris Apfel was that she. When I found out about her, I was getting to the point where I was getting not old, but older than I ever was, and I was feeling a little strange about that. But seeing someone who starts over in some ways or continues even in a slightly different branch of interest at such an older age, right? It's inspiring, and I found her inspiring. So I like that about her. So when she wrote this book, Iris Apfel, Accidental Icon, Musings of a Geriatric Starlet, I took it out of the library and read it right away. I still took it out of the library this time, and I just loved. I mean, look at this. Now I wear a lot of accessories where I can, and I always enjoyed accessories. I really do. I'm rarely without accessories. This is one of the few times I'm not wearing one of my hair clips, and she was one of those people who encouraged me when I felt like, am I being, immature by wearing certain things? And I said, well, I mean, obviously you have to wear things that are appropriate when you work in office settings, whatever, but I like the idea of being playful, So it's a memoir, but it's also her musing. So it's not always linear, and some of it felt a little repetitive, but I think it's because I've seen her documentary more than once. So it just repeats from anecdotes that I've already heard her say. So it's not necessarily like she was trying to be repetitive. And she's talking about her own life. Sometimes when you talk about your own life, you repeat yourself. Thankfully, her life was interesting enough that you want to hear it, although I'm in my 90s, I still feel like I'm 5.5 because I always look at the world like I'm discovering it for the first time. if I could remain one age forever, I wouldn't. I don't believe in that, etc. So that's what I mean. She had a nice perspective. It's not like I don't think she loved the slowing down, the health things that come with old age, but she wasn't letting it get her down as feeling, oh, I am not worth anything now that I'm older, and I love that about her. So like I said, when I found out that she had died, I was quite sad about it, but I said I'm gonna reread her book, and I did, and it was a good time. And I also read a little bit of another book by that had an introduction of her by her of a book about Zandra Rhodes, who is a another designer who is pretty amazing. But I didn't finish that book because it was like one of these big, almost coffee table books with small print, which is like the exact opposite of what I'm able to really enjoy reading. I did look at the pictures a lot because she did some designing for, well, a lot of interesting people, but also Freddie Mercury. So, I had to look into that, but I didn't finish it, so you're not going to hear probably any more about that. And that's okay. So moving on, I also read another book about the Tudors, but this time it was a newly released book called Young Elizabeth, Elizabeth I and Her Perilous Path to the Crown by Nicola Tallis. So she comes from one of the most notorious couples ever. Anne Boleyn, some people love her, some people hate her, some people just don't know what to think of her. Henry VIII, not a great person at all. Interesting in a lot of ways, mostly because of his situation with his wives. Not a great person. Not, so, but Elizabeth was born being, from a very hopeful pregnancy, but she ended up being a girl, which was a disappointment. But very shortly, she wasn't even 3 years old when her mother was executed by her father. Ugh. And then she still grew up in quite a lot of privilege. Let's face it. Lots more money than anyone can imagine. Her surroundings for a pretty, slightly perilous life. It does say a perilous path to the crown. It was, but at least she had some luxury to deal with. But anyway, so it goes into her life, and the people who helped bring her up, which were mostly her ladies and some of her educators, and then some of her stepmothers, especially Catherine Parr, who was very important to her. And then once her father died and her younger brother was king, it was a bit of an up and down situation because she moved in with Catherine Parr, who shortly later on married somebody, Thomas Seymour, who ended up apparently not being very appropriate with Elizabeth, and that messed up a lot of things. Got her into some trouble with the government, and her ladies, and some very important people in her life were imprisoned as a result. And then eventually Edward got sick and died, and then her sister was queen, and then it became even more perilous because Mary was trying to just, get everyone to convert to Catholicism. Elizabeth wasn't really for that, but she was trying to just navigate the situation. And then, of course, there were people who were trying to come up with rebellions to because they were against Mary's marriage to a Spanish, the Spanish, and Philip. And so people were looking to Elizabeth because she was next in line, and Mary, of course, would make that out to be a threat. And even though they had been close at certain times, Elizabeth came into a very dangerous situation. She was put in the Tower, possibly lodged where her mother had been before her own death. So I can see now, even though I don't condone a lot of things that Elizabeth did once she became queen, there were certain things that were downright cruel. I can understand a lot of times why she held on so much and why a lot of her actions were made because her past informed them. I'll get into that another time probably because I like, if you think I like ranting about my background, which isn't really my background, then can you imagine me ranting about something that I just read way too much about? And last but not least, I read a memoir and a little bit of a guidebook by Chloe Hayden called Different Not Less, a neurodivergence guide to embracing your true self and finding your happily ever after. So Chloe Hayden is an actress and other things, but she is in some television show that I'm not really interested in. I saw a clip and didn't seem to want to watch any more about that, but She found out at some point growing up that she was autistic, and later also found out that she was ADHD, that she had ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I believe. And so part of it is her own situation growing up and finding what, her own path. And also part of it is just a little bit of a, okay, if you're autistic, these are things that you could know, and how to handle certain situations and certain morbidities. And also if you know someone who is autistic, and how to deal with that, and how to be a friend, how to be a sidekick. She uses comparisons to certain Disney characters because she's very interested in Disney. And one was the genie from Aladdin, one was Simba from The Lion King, and one was the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Quasimodo. Um, and honestly, the Disney version is a lot more hopeful for all these characters because what they're based on, not so great. But I thought it was a good book because a lot of people nowadays find themselves dealing with being different in some way, and so it helps to find someone who is a bit of a success story. But there's a couple of objections that I read, and I didn't get as, for some reason, um, ranty about it as I did about my first book for some reason. But one of the things that I saw brought up in certain reviews was that, oh, she's very privileged. She's got a lot of money, or at least her parents seem to have had a lot of money. So it's kind of hard for people who don't have those resources to read something like that because, well, what can they really do in their situation? And that's true. Um, but in some ways, I thought even that was a learning experience because she writes about her upbringing. She did have some terrible things happen to her growing up, and she has some sicknesses that are not great. She has an autoimmune. I don't remember the exact wording of it, but it's called POTS, which is a very difficult thing to deal with. A lot of people are that I've heard of actually are dealing with that. It's sometimes you can't even stand up for long periods of time without fainting. Um, Something to do with the heart. I don't remember now. I'm so sorry. But because it was kind of early on in the book that she talked about it, so I forgot a lot. But anyway, but besides that, she just had having to deal with eating disorders. A lot of people who are autistic deal with eating disorders, it seems, and that's something that I've always imagined must be very difficult. And also the fact that she was incredibly bullied by people in her class. And the fact is that her parents, with all their money, which is, it just appears that they have a lot of money, or I don't know how rich, or they're at least very well off. All the resources, all the support that they've tried to give, all the understanding, and they sound like really good parents. Um, she still has to deal with things that were pretty awful. So in a way, I think it is a good awareness that being autistic or being neurodivergent can be quite a challenge, even in the best time period to deal with that, even the best situations. So I thought it was good. I There's a lot of books now, especially by, well, anyway, there's a lot of books out now about people dealing with different neurodivergent situations, and I think in a way it's good to have that kind of awareness. And it could get repetitive at times too, and not as linear as I may sometimes like in certain books, but I thought it was still an enjoyable book. And so all in all, I think it was pretty good reading once I got over myself. So there's a bit of a long video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. If you've ever read um yeah, any of these books, any of these authors as well, and what you've been up to in April, if I haven't heard from you. And thank you for watching. If you've liked talk about these things, if you like watching me rant a little bit for no really great reasons, and drinking tea, please subscribe, please do all the things. Thank you for watching. This is Catherine from Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely book and tea-filled day.